So just to announce that this session is being recorded, and I'll give it to Kanchan, who is chairperson of Harvard Hindu Alumni.
Thank you so much, Chandan, and welcome everyone on behalf of Harvard Hindu Alumni. It's really fantastic to have all of you here together with us, and I won't take too much of time as I understand Subhashish has so much to explain us, and we all are here together as much as knowledge as we can from his presentations, to which he has put too much of hard work. I'm very sure about it. So just a brief about Harvard Hindu Alumni. Basically, we are a group of alumni who are working on spreading about the real essence of Hinduism, what Hinduism is about, because there are so many concepts which have been given by Hinduism to the world, like, yoga, meditation, and other things. And we are here to explore more scientific approach and more holistic approach about the real Hinduism and its quality. Here we are going to talk about decoding ancient temples, which is like a very prominent part of Hindu culture. Like without going to temples, like Hinduism is always an incomplete. But here we are to understand what is science behind it and what are how we can get benefit out of it. So I'll hand over to Subhashish, and he'll explain us in more detailed and very subtle way about this science and how we are going to get benefit out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kanchan. I'll keep my introductions very short. I don't know if I'm visible, but I'm just going to probably just to optimize the video space, I'm going to go out of video because I can't see myself. I can only see Kanchan. But Kanchan, thank you very much. Is it okay that I just quickly run through this presentation? And
yes, please.
I'll take questions as things come. Okay. So,
sure.
So first of all, a quick introduction about what the agenda is today. I personally believe that it's going to be very interesting because I think Indian temples, specifically the ancient ones, there are multiple temples, but when it comes to the ancient temples, there's so much of wisdom. And so I would say the wisdom is actually revolutionary because for the first time, we are understanding that there's a huge quantum physics element to the ancient temples. So for example, I'm definitely going to speak quite a bit about these 3 points. I do not think we'll be able to have a lot of time to decode the geometry, the consciousness, the harmonics, etc., and talk about a new subject, and then talk about new applications. But let's get moving. So let's test our knowledge because this is what we have found out about after decoding temples. So first of all, let's test our knowledge a little bit. If you look at something like this, imagine the grandeur, imagine the architecture, imagine the absolute beauty and splendor of a temple. It's unbelievable. Now, this is actually the 8-dimensional universe. So we are now merging temples along with quantum physics. These statues that you see are actually archetypes and constellations. Now, we'll talk about more, but I can bet you that although people might say that these statues were made about 2,000 years back, in my opinion, they should be about 10,000, maybe 20,000 years. Let's talk about how advanced the ancient civilizations were. And this is basically the 64 codon rings of the human DNA. And this is the code of Tantra. If there were 100 tantric temples in India, and actually there were way more all over the world, only a few have been excavated. And then finally, what seems like a temple is really, really a psychological clock. So let's go right into decoding ancient temples, the why and the what. So I'm going to stop for a second and give host Chandan and Kanchan if they have any questions, and then we can cruise through this presentation.
So my first question is, what in short is the code?
The code is actually very complex, but this is about absolute quantum physics. It is actually about something called a E8 crystal, which is something that I want to show. The E8 crystal lattice won the mathematics Nobel Prize, called the Fields Medal, in 2022. And that is the reason we can get quantum physics mapped into the temples. Once I show it to people, they'll see objective evidence out of it. If there are no more questions, and we can take the
Thank you.
questions, I can go next. Kanchan, any questions before I begin?
Yes, actually, we would definitely want to know, like, how do you think the temples were built? Because I understand it's a very huge science behind it, and we would be really eager to know more about it.
Kanchan, you have asked me a question which is so difficult, and I'll tell you why it is so difficult. If I give you my opinion, people are going to think I'm a lunatic. But long story short, if you look at the absolute architecture of the temples and the number of temples, you can't really, it's like thousands of people have to be working on these temples. But the intricate nature of these temples shows us one thing, that these ancient Indians, they knew how to bend time and matter. And if I'm not considered as a lunatic, I would say that they knew something called black hole physics. And they knew how to bend matter and time and build these temples. So why don't I answer this question in this presentation, Pancho? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. So let's cruise. First of all, I would like to go deep into this subject. I think this is a very new kind of a wisdom. So decoding these temples, for example, if you go to the Archaeological Society of India, not mouthing them, but they're going to say these are step wells. These are not step wells at all. Telling that these are step wells and people just went, to draw water out, that is basically denigrating the entire ancient civilization. So let me explain to you what this is. So first of all, this is actually a code. So for example, if you look at the moon has 8 distinct phases. So what they did is that they built an astronomical clock using this particular technology. Imagine the precision of this particular architecture. So let's explain how it works. So what they did is they basically fill this up with water. So when you fill this up with water, what happens? You can reflect the sun and you can reflect the moon. So when you reflect it, the reflection of the moon comes in and then it goes out. And now as the sun and the moon system, they change, what really happens is the reflection basically falls into all these steps. The whole thing is like a torus. Like a torus would mean like a donut. And once you map the entire moon cycle, you're going to see that the moon cycle exactly corresponds with the steps. Now, this is a fascinating thing, right? Imagine the ancient Indians being able to map the entire moon cycle and then measure time. Now, they went even further. So for example, the light and shadows basically tells the hours and the minutes. Second would be, it also shows the relative position of the days. For example, when there is a new moon, full moon, etc., the shadows or the reflection are exactly going to go through that window or a door in that particular place. Then finally, what they did is they can map seasons. So this is an astronomical clock to measure time. Now let's go and look at another example. This is again, people say this is a step well. This is not a step well. This is an absolute wonder. Absolute wonder. So let's take a look at what this is, because this is all geometry, architecture, all that stuff. Now, think of this entire astrological clock. You're the observer. As an observer, you're basically seeing the horizon over here. So in the horizon, you can see the sun going up and down. Then you also bring the moon, right? Because the moon can be reflected. Now, think of this. The ends are basically the equinoxes. Sorry, the middle is the equinox, and at the end is the summer solstice and the winter solstice. Now they can reflect the moon on water. So this is how it looks like. They can reflect the stars, and now they can even understand where is the pole star to understand how things move. Now what happens? Just by looking at the shadows of the sun-moon system, they can find out the time, not only the present time, but cosmic time. Why cosmic time? Because cosmic time changes the psychology of people. Do we behave the same way every day? No. The moon changes our moods and all that. So what they did is, now they brought in the entire day system, and they started measuring the day and the time and all that. I think we might have to keep somebody on mute. Thanks a lot. So let's go forward. This seems to be a temple. Actually, this is not a temple at all. This is a cosmic clock. How do we know this? Well, this picture would be able to show what it is. That when the sun-moon system, which is a fractal system, when they rise, the tip of the temple basically goes around the four corners of the temple, and there are exact marks which show the hour from the shadow. From this, of course, we can they have gone a lot further. For example, if you take a look at this, it basically shows a lot more, which is the sun will exactly fit in at the tip during the solstices. So this is how they have mapped the entire model, and these steps were used to find out. The big steps were the seasons, the smaller steps were diurnal and monthly, and inside is the Nandi, the bull. So the bull was basically the Taurus constellation. Now, what is the meaning of that? It means Taurus, exactly at the eye of the bull, there are three planes that pass through it. So I won't go into the details of this, but what matters is these people knew how the cosmos worked way, way more than NASA. Okay, now how is it? Is this true? Yes, exactly every time during the summer solstice. Now this is Angkor Wat in Cambodia. The sun is exactly at the tip. Now imagine the precision of a massive architecture, that every time there is a 21st of June, every year, the sun will always be at the tip. This is the marvel of the ancients. What they have done is called archaeoastronomy. Archaeoastronomy means the architecture mimics the astronomy, and they were so precise. Now let's take a look at this one. It's a small video, but this is the gates of Bali. Now, why were these gates built? Let's take a quick look. Now, if you see, this is the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So the path of the sun and changes during these two different times. And between them, the seasons happen. Now, what happened is, if you see the corners of this, they basically mapped the entire architecture to the heavens. And these yellow circles are basically where the sun basically comes in at different stages, different seasons. So when the sun pops out from the pillars, it shows the seasons. This is nothing but an astrological wonder. So the point that I want to make is these, which are called stepwells, they are not stepwells, but absolutely amazing ancient architecture. And these are nothing but astrological wonders that measured psychological time. Imagine this kind of an architecture. Look at the precision that is arranged with the cosmic cycles. Imagine this kind of an architecture which decoded how the heavens, how the cosmos moves. Now, this subject again is called archaeoastronomy. So this is one method which says why they use temples. So they measured cosmic cycles. They built the architecture that was aligned with it. They delineated what is called clock time and psychological time. That we're going to cover for a short bit, but we want to go right into understanding this code, which is all about understanding what is clock time, what are the cosmic cycles, and understanding this code. So let's take a moment to understand what it is. So to understand this code, we need to understand two fundamental differences. One is called clock time, that is based on your clock. And the other is based on fractal psychological time. So what does it mean? It means that the ancients did not view every day to be the same. Clock time is all about objective reality. It is about determinism. It is that truth is in the external world, that everything is finite. On the other hand, the ancients said, no, the subjective human experience, your feelings, your emotions, which is infinite, is the only truth. So currently, our system, that is Newtonian, says that you are mechanistic, you're a robot. And there's no gut feelings, all that stuff. There's no emotions. You can have emotions, but that's it. You're just mechanistic. And everything is separated. The ancients said, no, your intuition, your emotions, and your inner experience is the reality. Your emotion is the reality. So what happens is, and this is where we need to go into the temple. So let me change slides a little bit, because I don't want to, let me cover, so let me explain how the ancients work by explaining the 8-dimensional universe and quantum physics in temples. The ancients viewed the human being as diamonds, that is the DNA. And consciousness is the unseen light that passes through everything. Now, what is consciousness? Everything that the ancients did is all about consciousness. It is a self-awareness that exists all over the universe. Everything. Ultimately, consciousness pervades everything. What the ancients did is they studied energy. Now, let's take a moment to understand this diagram. This is the entire spectrum of light. What we see is only the visible light, only a very small piece of the entire spectrum. Nobody knows what the rest of the spectrum is. You know, we can use shortwave and FM and radar and all that. Infrared, for example, cooks our, in our microwave. But beyond that, we know nothing about it. So think of this. There are so many unseen energies in the universe that we don't see, but we can feel. And that is exactly why all the ancient civilizations named their countries based on light. Now, this is not the visible light. By the way, if you look at us humans, we don't see visible light at all. We see reflected light. So think of it. We cannot see light. Light would mean the entire light spectrum. So the ancient countries, if you look at their names, for example, India was known as Jambudeep. Deep means light. Let's look at Albania, for example. It comes from the word Laban, which means, it means the white mountains, mountain of light. Lebanon, for example, comes from Laban, which means the mountain of light. Everywhere you go, all the countries were named based on light. Now, what were they studying? What they were studying is astral light. It's the light that comes from the entire cosmos, not just the visible world. So what they did is they understood the secret, and that is, if the sun-moon system can actually cause these tides, it also changes the body chemistry because of water. So the body chemistry, ultimately, if you look at what happens, is that there is electrical and magnetic fields in our body, and that's the reason of our aura. So if you look at the meridians in Chinese acupuncture, all the veins, arteries, etc., that connect to our entire organs, for example, it is an electrical system, and the heart basically creates a magnetic system. So we are electromagnetic and energy beings. Everything in this universe is energy. Now let us say that we had the eyes to see all these energies floating within us. This is exactly how it would seem like, that we are immersed in this cosmic light, and all this cosmic light gets into our DNA and creates behavior. That is called psychological time. Now, this is the basis of what the ancients did. So let's look at temples. Now, what is stunning is that ancient temples were actually built on this premise that it mimicked the human body. Mimicked the human body? Why? Because the human was the map of the universe. So the universe, the atom, and the human were one and the same. So the macrocosm and the microcosm and the human was one and the same. Now, why? So let's take a look at why, and let's prove this. Saying is something, and then showing evidence is something else. They really understood how energy flows. They understood the Fibonacci series way long back. They understood pi to 32 decimals way long back. In the Veda, there are shlokas, verses. If you translate them, it shows pi to 32 decimal points. But why 32? We'll come to that as well. So what happened is they realized that all energy flows in golden ratios. Now, golden ratio is a fundamental piece in our body. Our entire body can be mapped based on the golden ratio, which is the ratio 1.618. So what is the major piece of the golden ratio? It is the only ratio in the world where the sum and the parts have a certain ratio. So for example, A divided by B, if you add A plus B and divide it by A, it will give you the same ratio. So where is this ratio in the human body? The ratio is everywhere. So this is, for example, within our hand, you can see the exact piece in a butterfly. You can see the sunflower arranged in 34 and 21, 34 that moves on the right, 21 that moves on the left. The whole thing is all about nature. If you can understand nature, it will show you exactly how consciousness flows to create the objective nature. Now, the ancients understood this extremely, extremely well. They realized that there was a science to everything. The science is there is something called doubling. So you can see over here, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16. This is the feminine. It doubles. This is the Shakti, the feminine. It doubles. But when it goes and crystallizes, that is, the subjective becomes the objective, it has a certain pattern. It is called the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence goes like this. I'm sure many people know, but let's say you have 1. The self-awareness says move forward, and it creates 1 again. Now it says the next thing would be 1 plus 1. That is, what was preceding is going to be the future. So what is the past becomes the future. So now what is 3? 3 is 2 plus 1. What is 5? 5 is 3 plus 2. Likewise, on the left is the energies of doubling. On the right is the Fibonacci series where the feminine becomes the masculine. So subjective becomes the objective. That is, consciousness crystallizes into matter. The ancients actually built temples showing the detailed mathematics in these temples. So while many people look at the beauty of these temples, there's math. The problem is that we have forgotten about it. But those who understand this, they regularly use this to build companies and make them big. Because when you build something like this Apple logo is based on the golden ratio and the Fibonacci series as well. You can see, it is hard to see this, but 1, which is circle number 1, it becomes 2, then 3, then 5, the Fibonacci series. Now this becomes an energy attractor. So now you can attract every MacBook, every Apple phone is now an attractor of this energy. This is what the ancients knew. So let's take a look at what they understood as well. They realized this golden ratio is not only in the objective world. They understood it is also the same in where? In the heavens. So this is Earth and Venus moving together. And if you see, they basically create something called a pentagram or a pentacle. Sorry, not a pentagram, a pentacle. And this keeps repeating again and again and again. This is why they map the heavens in a big way, because what is above is below. Now let's take a look at interesting stuff. I hope we can all do some mathematics. I promise I'll keep it easy. This is the Borobudur temple, and this is the top view. We'll never be able to understand this temple until we understand very complex 8-dimensional mathematics. But let's make this easy for now. The first thing is, this one is 12. This is the zodiacal arrangement. But if you take a look at the circles, you'll see something interesting emanating. They basically exactly show the mathematical rhythm of these circles. Now, why is it? Let's take a look. Now, there are 5 distinct layers. There are 5 distinct layers, and then there are 3 circles. And then finally, there is a ninth. Now, why? Because the ancients did not use the Cartesian plane that we use today. They used a very different mathematics, because this particular temple is actually a quantum energy harvester. It harvested energy from the cosmos. Now, they used absolutely different kind of mathematics called vortex mathematics. Now, let's explain what is vortex mathematics. I'll play the animation, but let's take a look at this. At the top, you see 9. 9 was the number that is, you cannot change that number. It's God, it's consciousness. But on the other hand, the feminine is all about doubling. So 1, if you double, becomes 2. 2, if you double, becomes 4. 4, when you double, becomes 8. 8, when you double, becomes 16. But that's the Cartesian number. They said, no, it doesn't matter. The numbers are spiral, they are polar. And they all converge together. So now 16 is 1 plus 6, that's 7. So now 7, if you double, becomes 14, that's 5. What they realized, there is an absolute number property that exists in the universe, and that is the energy moves like a toroidal field over here, which is all numbers have energy. The 9 just simply exists to serve this energy between the 3 and the 6, the 3 and the 6, and it becomes polarity. They viewed numbers absolutely different, which is, if you put a number, this is called toroidal mathematics. It will go back into as many loops as possible, but come back again. This is nothing but the physics of implosion. Today, what do? We follow explosion. Everything is made to destruct. We have to destroy something to create energy out of it. They said, no, we don't need to destroy anything. We just have to simply converge all these energy. And this is called black hole physics. So everything, the torus, the human body, the energy was a torus. The entire field of the earth was a torus. The entire cosmos was a torus. And then finally, the heart, the rhythms of the heart is a fractal torus. So the heart basically absorbs energy to a torus field, which creates the aura. And that's why the heart can keep moving and moving and moving, because it is a torus field. Now, how do we know the ancients knew all this? They knew all this because temples were designed to look like a torus. Why were they going over here? Well, this temple is a DNA temple, which we'll talk about this. This is the 64 codon ring temple. We'll definitely talk about this. But they realized that in the heavens, all these torus fields were like a holographic. The universe was like holographic. And they had rings upon rings upon rings of stars. So what they did is they mapped the inner ring and they mapped outer rings, and they gave them archetypal qualities. So for example, if you look at a chair, you can look at a snake, a rose, a bow, an arrow, all that stuff. They were basically archetypes of these constellations because they mapped the entire universe in our psyche. They knew very, very well that the whole stars and constellations were mapped like a torus field that maps onto the earth and which maps onto the human. So everything was about convergence. Now, what did they do? They started observing, as we explained, the dance of these planets. And they started mapping the whole earth as well. So this is how they mapped the entire earth, the universe, and of course, the human. So ultimately, this is how it looks like. which means now the entire Earth was built. They mapped this, they mapped all the grid lines like a dodecahedron based on the constellations and the Earth energies. And that's why they built temples at the exact location of these grids. Now, how did they know all this? What was the secret of this? They realized that in the universe, all these movement of stars, planets created a hum. It is like a music, one verse, one song. So what did they discover? They discovered that this sound energy creates shapes. Over here, you can see a shape being formed just by creating a particular sound. Let's take a look at this. A microphone blaring a certain music, and now on this plate, you've got sand. You change the sound and you change the shape. So all these temples were also built on harmonics, and our language was built on harmonics of sound, that we could utter certain sounds and actually heal ourselves. Now, let's go and talk about if this is true. Now, this is the experiment that I want to show you, and it's very short, but it's super. I want to show you that sound creates shapes. Every shape has a certain sound that comes from the universe. Now, let's take water and then we levitate it. When you levitate it, and now you pass a certain ultrasonic sound. Now, there are harmonics, right? So let's say you were passing a frequency of 1, the second harmonic would be 2. The third would be the double. And likewise, it keeps going on. This is called the octaves. Remember, the universe, one verse, one song. What is a song? A song is an octave. This is what happens with the first harmonic. This is the shape that is created. The second harmonic goes like this. The third harmonic goes like this. It is tetrahedral. Now, this is the fourth harmonic, and you're going to see these in the temples as well. Finally, the fifth harmonics is like a pentagon, a pentacle. The sixth harmonic is a six-pointed star that we see all around the world. The seventh harmonic is, a seven-pointed star, and the eighth harmonic is basically, it has 8 points like a star, crystal. What did people do with this energy? It's all energy, remember. What they did is they built temples. They also built forts all around the world. Now think of this. On the left is something all over the world. I don't know what the location is, but on the right, just to tell everybody that in India, the same forts happened as well. And I can tell you these forts are not 2,000 years. They're probably 5,000, 6,000 years old. But what were they doing? They knew that they can harvest the energy just by building a shape. And what is it? The shapes basically come from the universe, that you can create the shape and you can extract the energy. That was the code. Now, what I want to show you is that all these harmonics that we saw also exist in the universe, in the planetary system. This is a 2 to 3 minute video. Take a look. So thanks for watching this section. So let me carry on. What they basically did is understand the movement, because from there came the different mathematical equations like Euler, Euclid, Archimedes spiral and all that. The ancients knew all this way, way before, just by understanding these mathematics. Now, what they also did is that they took these energies, which is nothing but harmonics and waves, they mapped these energies, and what they did is they built a model, which is what we call as astrology. Now, the way the Indians used to do the astrology, which is Vedic astrology, uses kind of a house system. You can see this particular object at the bottom, which is the first house, second house. Don't have to worry about it, astro stuff, but I just need you to look at the structure. Now, this is where we get into quantum physics. But first, let me tell you what the E8 crystal is. The E8 crystal won the Mathematics Nobel Prize in 2022. I believe it was 2022. And what happened over here, what the E8 crystal does, long story short, it shows what the 8-dimensional universe is going to look like. So let's take a look at how it looks like. So you see the atom was the universe was the atom. So the structure of the atom is like 8 dimensions. And let us take a look at the E8 crystal. This is how the E8 crystal looks when you are on a 3-dimensional plane. It has 240 points or vertices of energy, and it keeps moving. So think of you're in a three-dimensional world. How would you see a universe that has 8 dimensions? This is how it's going to look like. Now, why do we bring this? Because this is where we move into quantum physics of the universe mapped to a temple. This E8 crystal is actually what is on the ceiling. Now, if you look at the ceilings in ancient temples in India, take a look at this piece. This is in 3D of a temple built by, this is an ancient Jain temple. Nobody knows how old this is. I would say this is at least 20,000 years old. But look at how could somebody build this on a ceiling? How would you even do it? So this is why I say the ancients were something very different. They knew alchemy, they knew all these sciences. But let us understand how we can project an E8 crystal on basically a temple ceiling like this. Here it goes. Take a look at, if you map the E8 crystal on the temple ceiling, you will see an exact fit. Now, this shows how the 8-dimensional universe was mapped into the ceilings of these temples. Now, this video is for 4 minutes, and we don't have time for that. But each and every point traces out these different curves which are over here. And they do it precisely. So the ancients knew that the entire temple was the cosmos, and that's how they built these temples. Now, if you take the E8 crystal and project it on a surface that is 2D, this basically shows the mandalas. The mandala is on the right. It's just the same picture in a different form. So it was all about quantum physics. If you look at these temples, ancient temples, and see these particular circles, they are nothing but the same. So what we have done is we have taken that E8 crystal and mapped it on ceiling after ceiling of these ancient Indian temples. And each time we see it, It is a perfect match. So, does that mean the 8-dimensional universe was mapped into it? Well, it exactly, it shows exactly these points when you map it. Now, is this an opinion? It has to be an opinion. How do I know what the ancients completely did? We are just trying to figure it out. But every time I do it, it just works. So for example, we map this into a church called the Mosta Church in Malta. In Malta, let me tell you, if you go there, the ancient civilization is in ruins. But if you map it, the E8 crystal traces the exact geometry again and again and again. So it showed that all these temples were built on an ancient knowledge of that 8-dimensional universe. Now, how accurate can this be? Accurate. Let's take a look at these two. On the left is a picture from Japan, probably, which is on the ceiling, of this in the University of Chicago. On the right is exactly the same structure, very similar structure, or at least meaning, on the right-hand side. At the center, it shows that 5 become 1. Now, why 5? What were the energies? Well, the ancients knew there are 7 basic energies. The seven basic energies are the sun, moon, and all the other planets. That's why we have 7 days. Okay, now this shows the 5 become 1, which means that they are taking away the sun and the moon, and these are the 5 energies that are emanating from this particular temple. Now, why the 4 quadrants? We'll come to that a little later, but let's take a look at the ancient temple over here. Look at the carvings at this place. Now, what were the pillars? The pillars were how the energy of the stars connected with our DNA, which I'm going to show a little later. So let's take a look at the Mayan pyramids. So over here, if we map it, it is again an exact map. It's an exact 1-to-1 map where all these points move across the steps, along the major steps and the minor steps. And we have done this again and again and again, and we see this again and again happening with the E8 crystal. So now, why were there so many steps? There were so many steps, and there were 91 steps on each side, with 1 at the center, which creates 365 steps. So when people say that the Mayans or the Aztecs just used to decapitate people, that's entire BS, because they were all cosmologists. Any idea that people were being killed, like in the movie Apocalypto, it showed like a gory picture. It was not at all like that. Neither. If somebody has to call our ancestors, like chimpanzees and all that, that's utter BS as well. Why is that? Because the ancients were brilliant quantum scientists, and neither were they, agricultural oriented people that people paint. They were quantum scientists. They were brilliant beyond imagination. Now, let me also prove their brilliance by showing how the E8 crystal, when mapped, the 8-dimensional crystal, when mapped on the Borobudur temple, you will see the exact map of these circles, exactly where these circles are. Exact. This shows the ancients knew the E8 crystal, or the 8-dimensional universe, 30,000, maybe 40,000 years back. So what happens with the golden ratio inside the E8 crystal? There has to have a lot of golden ratios. There is. If you look at this, this is basically doing a matrix transform, and you can see the phi written all over it. When you transform and create the golden ratio transform, this is the shape it creates. Take a look at this shape. Doesn't this shape sound or look familiar? Maybe this will tell you what it is. This is the six-pointed star that is in India, and this was all over the world. Now, what is it? Now, this is where we have to decipher the ancient Vedic knowledge. So let's do a little bit of digging into this. It says the Shatkonas, the six-pointed star, basically stands for the Shiva and the Shakti. It's like two forces going in opposite directions and merging with each other. But then if you look at this, it says that it came out of the deity Sanat Kumara. Okay, now let's study this a little bit. That there has to be, Sanat Kumara, for example, the sacred number of 6. Sacred number 6, so there has to be 6 points or 6 perfect energy system. Now, if you see, there are 5 over here. So that's the ether, Brahma, and then you have the 4 elements, water, earth, air, fire. But where's ultimately the 6th? The 6th is right over here. So what is this? This is basically the yin-yang system. If you look at the yin-yang system, that is male, female coming together, for example, you will see there is a boundary where things don't mix at all. This is the place of dynamic neutrality, which is the bindu. Now, this is where, what is Sanatan Dharma? Sanatan Dharma is just understanding the physics of these 6 elements. So how do we know this was real? We can take the 6th element of creation and then map it into the Sri Yantra. It's a near perfect match. So the entire code of the Vedas has to be looked at it in a very different way. We cannot personify it. We have to understand that Sanat Kumara, for example, it said that there were 4 brothers or whatever, 4 energies. Out of these 4 energies, they said they were celibate. Now, what does celibate mean? It means distinct, does not mix. It holds its essence. So if you look at how we need to decode this, it basically means that there are 4 distinct, air, water, air, earth. Then the other distinct piece is the ether. And the next distinctness is nothingness. What does it signify? Take a look. This is how, what it signifies is a cube. Let's prove this. There are 6 faces. You can see over here, 1 face, 2 face, 3rd face, all emanating from one distinct square. And once the 5th is made, which is the 4, the nothingness, the 4th one, automatically is created. Sorry, let me backtrack this. So from the 1, you get the 4 energies. When they fold together, ultimately what happens is it creates the final, the 6th phase, which is nothingness. So that means how we have to interpret this code is one distinct Brahma, the 4 distinct is the air, water, air, earth, and finally there has to be a polarity. Now, when you have to decode 8 dimensions, this is how it should look like. And this is called a hypercube. What is a hypercube? It is like taking each and every square and making a cube out of it by tracing it into the 8th dimension. Now, from 3D, this energy becomes 4D. We are not even at 8D. This is 4-dimensional consciousness. Now, I'm going to show to you exactly how the 4-dimensional hypercube is the energy of these temples. Now, this is exactly how the whole thing looks like. Now, let's prove it. Now, this is a temple in India. Now, we won't understand this temple if you look at it like this. But once you look at it from the top, it just makes sense. Why? So let us bring the 8 dimensions over here. So 8 dimensions would be line. The second dimension is a square. The third dimension is a cube. The fourth dimension is a tesseract or the hypercube. Now, I want you to take a look at this particular piece. This is the 4 cube projected on 2D. If I take this and map it on the temple, it is an exact match. Exact match. It is telling you what this temple was used for. It was used to basically harvest or connect with the 4-dimensional consciousness energies. Now, we cannot move forward without understanding the yantras. What were these yantras? These yantras were basically a system of taking the 8-dimensional consciousness and then showing what the shape of these would be. For example, if you take this one, this will map right into this particular yantra. This is all quantum physics. So which means if you take this and now you take the Buddhist Tantra over here, now we understand how to decode this. So let's decode this for a moment, what these yantras stood for. For example, if you look at the hypercube, there are 24 squares, 32 lines, 16 vertices. So what does this mean? Now, this is a fundamental piece because this means that this inner circle is the Shiva male, which is the 16 lines over here. This is the female energy, which is the 16 points of the hypercube. And you can see the square over here, which means the hypercube in this picture. And then finally, the inside is the moon cycle, which is the 14 to 15 days cycle. So what they did is they said, you don't need to understand hyperdimensional physics. The only thing you need to know is how this system works. So this system, this particular square is earth, this is fire, this is water, and this is air. They told you the exact code, how each day, each yantra emits a certain energy based on the sun-moon system. And this is how they decoded it. So we don't really have to understand the quantum physics behind it, but if we understand the energies that are coming down and touching our DNAs, we will be able to make a lot of sense of how you can actually manipulate these energies for your own convenience sometimes. So let's go back to the temples again and decode them a little bit. The Egyptians, for example, had this Ankh. So what is the Ankh over here? Let's decode this. Now, if you look at this, it is showing 2 Ankhs over here. You can only understand this when you understand the ancient temples of the world, because the picture of the Ankh is right over here in this temple. So again, what was the Ankh then? The Ankh is basically all about hyperdimensional 4D physics that stood to talk about the 4-dimensional consciousness. How does it look like? This is how it looks like. This is what people call Christ consciousness. This has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. This is the consciousness that people said as, this is called Christos, or from Christos, you've got Christ. You can clearly see this is 4-dimensional hypercube mapped into the matrix of the 1010 or black and white, and which is basically our DNA or the sun-moon system, which we'll talk about later. Now, I know there's only 14 more minutes that I can talk about, so I will kind of rush through this a little bit. What was the Ankh? The Ankh was nothing but the Shivalinga. The Shivalinga or the Ankh was where the male and the female energies, they come together. And where are these energies coming from? From consciousness. Where are these energies? Can we see them? No, we cannot see them because the entire light spectrum, the total light, that is capital light, is the entire frequencies. And the only thing that we can see is the visible light, but only when we reflected it. So what was the Shiva Linga? The Shiva Linga was basically not a genital. It was a mark. What does the Jyotirlinga mean? It is a mark of light. What does Jyotish mean? It means the study of light. So what are these what are these Jyotirlingas? The Jyotirlingas, there are only 12 of them. It is incorrect. There has to be 64 of them. Now, how do I know this is accurate? This is accurate because the Puranas basically say there are 64 of them. There has to be 64 because of the 64, points in a hypercube and also 64 codon rings of our DNA. But there's way more other stuff. Ancient India used to be the meridian, the Greenwich Mean Time used to pass over here. And these Jyotirlingas were basically where they considered this to be 0 degrees latitude, longitude. Not longitude, I think it's longitude, not latitude. But this is where they map the entire grid of the earth by putting these marks. So let me stop over here by ultimately concluding how we to map temples, and these temples were basically 4-dimensional hypercube physics. So just to conclude, the ancients knew the map of the universe, and it was an 8D crystal lattice. They also knew that the human DNA, the atom, the universe, the macro and the micro came together. They studied consciousness. They studied subjective and objective, and how the subjective creates the objective to create materials. The ancients studied the light, which is capital light, and used alchemy to change their world. They were quantum scientists harnessing this energy, and finally they followed toroidal physics, which is all about creating black holes. It is all about converging everything. And that is why we have to be careful talking about ancient Indians and ancient temples, because this shows that they left a legacy on stone for us to decode. So I know I've spoken too much. This is too much of information. And before I do that, I want to, send this back to the moderators, Kanchan and Chandan, for any questions that you might have or anybody might have. And we just have 12 more minutes. So do you think we should just cover a little more and do it for a next session? I'm going to, ask you folks to talk about what we should do.
Of course, Subhashish. Okay, all right.
Yeah, go ahead, Kanchan.
No, you please carry on.
Okay, so I'm going to move swiftly in the next couple of presentations, like what were the statues? But to understand these statues, we have to understand why they wanted to build all these. Because time was fractal. Time was fractal would mean that they knew that cycles repeat. And this is the understanding of the yugas. Now, how do we know? How do we know time cycles repeat? Because events repeat. Events keep on repeating. For example, over here, you can see a bigger cycle, which is 250-year revolutionary cycle. Inside is an 84-year cycle. And inside of it is a 28-year cycle. It's a harmonic of 3. Now, 28 is basically the revolution of Saturn. 84 is the revolution time it takes for Uranus. And 250 is the revolution time of Pluto. What can we do? We can now look at all these quantum cycles. You don't need to really study astrology. You just need to understand the archetype and map these. And once you map it, all these events will make sense that change the world. Now, where are we? Now we are at a start or the brink of an absolutely big 45-year innovation cycle that has already begun. It is going to start full swing in 2025. It's a technological cycle that happened during the Industrial Revolution. But now this is going to be the next stage. That's why we are all talking robotics and this and that. And all these technological cycles are all pointing upwards. Now, do we know if all these energies affect us? Well, the answer is yes. The best way to show how these energies basically affect us by looking at a stock and just simply putting the moon cycle. You will see during full moon, the stock price is going to go down, and during the new moon, the stock price is going to go up. Now, this is S&P. And if you follow these cycles, there's always not going to be perfect because the moon changes the psychology of people completely. But we have always seen this particular energy work. There's more. This shows that during full moon, there are more accidents. So people have analyzed statistics of all crashes during full moon, new moon. Doctors and nurses should be able to say that this is full moon, there's going to be way more patients, way more accidents today. Similarly, people can understand that the energies during winter actually creates more suicidal risk. So now you can prevent all these happening just by understanding the patterns of these energies. Now let's look at ancient civilizations over here. Now this is the Indus Valley and Harappan civilization, which is over here you can see Pashupati. Now what does Pashupati mean? Pashupati means the lord of animals, but that is not how the ancients looked at it. They looked at Pashupati as the lord of the zodiac. The zodiac from Zod means the zoo, which is the zoo which has animals. So all these over here, you can see a bull, you can see a lion, you can see a deer, you can see an elephant, you can see a fish over there, which means Pisces. So basically what happened is all the language that we see in the Indus Valley civilization and the seals are all astrological. Now, this is even more funny, or not funny, but extremely interesting. And that is the Indus Valley civilization language is the same as the Easter Island language as well. Easter Island is like 15,000 miles in the Pacific Ocean. So how is it that the Indus Valley civilization, the entire language, was that of the Easter Island? And this is where we have to understand that there used to be a lost continent called Lemuria. Now, very obviously, the Germans, basically Max Muller and all those people at that time, they named it Lemuria, a lost continent, which was attached to India, like a joke. Why? They said, oh, because the lemurs in the Easter Islands are the same lemurs in India. Is that even a hypothesis? Okay, this kind of denigration happens again and again. And when it happens, you have to understand there is something they're trying to hide. What are they trying to hide? They're trying to hide that the continent called Lemuria, why? Lumen means light. All that land used to practice alchemy, how to transform light into matter. And these were the symbols they used to use as a code. And all these symbols are basically astrological. So take a look at this, for example. These are the Indus Valley seals. What they did is, for each and every energy, they put a zodiacal energy, which is an animal. So this is Taurus, the bull. Now this is Gemini, the twin. This is basically Leo, the tigers, this is Leo, the cat. And this is Leo major and Leo minor. So likewise, this is where Lemuria was. Now, this is what I'm going to show is absolutely going to shock everybody, but we'll explain why everything is actually constellations. Britannia is basically a virgin and a lion. From there, you get Britannia. This is also called the Lion of Judah in, for the Jews. And this is the emblem of India, where you have a virgin and a lion. So this temple clearly articulates this exact same thing, which is the energy of Leo and Virgin, Virgo, coming together. That's the meaning of the entire archetype in these temples. Now let's go and decode some of these, the gods that we talk about. Now over here, this picture is a little distorted, but this is the inner circle. This is where you have Polaris, which is the North Star. The Polaris has not always been the North Star, I can guarantee you, because the North Star keeps changing based on 10,500, 20,000 years. So let's take a look at this one. On the left is a picture from Japan that they worshipped, and on the right is, we have Saraswati over here. Now you can clearly see what it means. Both of them, Saraswati or even Lakshmi, they meant the Lyra constellation. So which means here is the biggest star called Vega. So which means the biggest star Vega, where is it? In the Lyra constellation. And it tells you where it is. Over here, this dragon is the Draco constellation. So Lyra is on top of Draco. And over here, the swan is the archetype for Cygnus. So now we know what they are basically talking about. They are saying that Vega is the main star, and an archetype of Vega on top of the swan, which is Cygnus, basically creates a certain quality. What is the quality? Education, wealth, and all that stuff. So what the ancients did, they mapped all these energies on the globe, and today, all these, for example, you can see the highway over here between Boston to New Orleans. This is basically a ley line. Now, how do we understand where this ley line started? All this ley line started from Glastonbury, which is probably where we have the Stonehenge. So from the Stonehenge, if you can map the entire ley line, you can actually find out how these energy flows. And today there's a highway. So these people, the ancients, they mapped the entire movement of the sun and the moon through the zodiac. And that is how they sucked in energy and created architecture. So here's, for example, this is Las Vegas, which is actually the exact shape mapped into Vega. So let's take a look at why all these notes and symbolism and the Freemasonry and all that, they're all talking about the same stuff. It's just that we don't know it. So this is the $1 note on the left, and this is basically Lyra. But what was Lyra? The ancients mapped this basically as a tortoise or a turtle. You see the exact thing over here, which is 13, over here 13 arrows. This is talking about the 13 pieces of the movement of the moon, and it is an exact match. So what we see is they have basically just put in a zodiac over here and how the moon needs to travel, and during, there's a lot of code in this, let's not even talk about it. But they mapped all this wisdom into alchemy and hermeticism. How do you interpret all these constellations? This is one, Phoenix, the eagle. This is Aquila, another eagle. This is talking about two lines, the Leo minor and the Leo major, which is Regulus, the constellation of Leo, and this is the morning star and the evening star. So all these energies are now mapped into a single picture. We just have to decode it. For example, this is the double-headed eagle. This is everywhere, all over the world, even in India. So you'll see the adoption of the double-headed eagle is everywhere, from Albania to Russia to Roman Empire to Mysore, India. What is going on? Now, if I show you what the double-headed eagle is, you're going to fall from the chair, because it has nothing to do with eagles, but the two zodiacal elements between the phoenix and Aquila. That is what it is. So this is how everything that is being run by the ancients is being followed today as well, by showing you the zodiac. So what about Shiva? So there are 108 archetypes of the dance of Shiva. Now the question is, Natraj, what does it mean? You can clearly see Natraj over here is creating the 6-pointed star, exactly showing how consciousness basically moves. But moves from where? It shows the exact point in the cosmos where the energy moves. So on the left foot, it shows that the energy is basically coming from Sirius, which is Canis Major, Canis Minor. And then it is showing where the Orion constellation, that is where the energy of Shiva comes in, and how it is mapped. And then it mentions the exact behavior. Now let's take a look at this. Now this is an extremely difficult pose for any human being to do. And these are the different yoga poses. And it tells you exactly the map of where the Shiva, the consciousness, comes from, which part of the heaven. So the question is, what are these statues? Now, if I show you how brilliant the ancients were, because they coded the entire consciousness or point of consciousness of the universe by just building one statue. So let's take a look at this by decoding it. The navel of Vishnu is three-dimensional because now you have 6 hands, which shows the 3 axes. The left foot is the west, and it tells you exactly where the galactic center is. From the galactic center, you can now map the entire heaven. So this is, for example, Ophiuchus, Altair, and Arcturus, which is the code, the 3 serpents. This showed how consciousness rises through a person or the zodiac. This shows Pollux, which is the arrow, Orion, the swordsman. This is Orion's belt, the 3 stars. This is Taurus, the bull. This is the constellation of Lepus. And this is the bow and arrow of Gemini. So they are basically mapping the entire piece. This is how they mapped each and every statue to the constellations to show where exactly is the energy coming from. So when people talk about Tantra and eroticism and all that stuff, I have to tell you, that is denigration of all Tantra, because they were all mapping the constellations to the human DNA. So this is the last 5 minutes. I'm going to show you the 64 codon rings of the human DNA, because what they did is to basically ensure that they show how the energy of the cosmos enters the 64 codon rings of our human DNA. This is the study called cosmobiology. So this picture is in Egypt. It is the same thing that I'm going to show you as the Indian temples. But to decode this requires advanced astrological wisdom and understanding of how a human DNA needs to be coded with the stars. So if you look at this picture, you will see on the body right on the top, there are certain pairs. So pairs would mean on the top is the pairs of our DNA, which is 32 pairs of 64 codon rings. And at the bottom, it is telling you exactly which constellations this particular DNA needs to connect with. It is a code. So let's look at the code in terms of India, which was way more advanced. On the left, you can see the different constellations. So on the left, for example, look at the feet over here. This feet exactly tells you which constellation is going to be the next, which creates archetypal behavior. So in the middle, you can see that there is a ram, Aries, and the body of a woman, that's Virgin, which is Virgo. On the right, so the point is, I don't have to tell you how it is because it's complex. Let's look at a temple that encoded the entire human DNA. This is a temple in Madhya Pradesh in India. This is how it looks like. This is an entire torus field. Now, if you take the 64 deities all around, this is basically the yin-yang I Ching. This is where you can take the 64 codon rings and then map it based on the entire 64 codon ring of our DNA code. That this is the same thing as the mandalas. There are 64 gates in the mandalas on the right, and there are 64 codon rings in this particular circle. It shows you how this 1 becomes 2, then becomes 4, then becomes 8, then becomes 16, then becomes 32, and then finally 64. Is there proof? So this is the exact combination of a DNA torus. So the DNA basically curls into itself, right? How many pairs are here? You can count it. There are 32 pairs of this, of the codon ring. Everything goes as polarities, that is double. So the 32 pairs of our human DNA can now be mapped exactly on the 32 pillars of the DNA. So think of this. The ancients actually knew everything about the human DNA, and this temple is probably 20,000 years back for sure, because you can't date stone. Now, how do we know this is true? So I need you to take a look at the steps over here. You see, there's a kind of a digital code, not a digital, like a Morse code over here. So over here, people used to go inside, stretch their arms, and it told them what is the purpose of their soul in the human DNA. And this is called the gene keys now. But nevertheless, how do we know this was the human DNA? The 64 codon rings over here this is the 3 steps that doesn't have this code. They are the stop codons. And the one that has the code is the start codon. So the point is, the ancients basically knew how to map the constellations. They knew how to map the entire torus field, and they knew how to map each constellation and the archetypal behavior it caused in the human DNA. They were so advanced, and this particular physics is called implosive physics. And this implosive physics is the science of creating black holes. So I know I've been speaking for a long time, so I just want to call Kanchan and Chandan to finally say a few words before we complete this entire presentation. So over to you, folks.
Thank you so much, Subhashish. It was such a fascinating session, I would say. Like living in India and understanding what our temples are, but have never gone into so much of depth, and the wisdom which you have shared is really, really amazing. So I really want to thank you, like, being a part of Harvard Hindu Alumni and sharing a wisdom which was really, really very intriguing and very, very fascinating, I would say. And before we end, there are, as I know many people of you are really eager to know more about the subject and more about the topic. So I would like to promise you all that we are coming soon with a second, or I would say continuation session of the same topic, because the way Subhashish has explained, and I'm sure there is so much more to talk about it. If I'm wrong, please correct me, Subhashish. And we would definitely want to have a second session about it. Yes, for sure. Yes, Victoria, I got it. And before you say, I was also on the same line of having a second session. And a very special thanks to my dear friend Chandan, who has been a pillar for us to organize this event. And, you know, he's also alum of our Harvard Business School. And yes, he has, like, you know, he was the man behind the whole scene who has managed and let us have this session without any interference or without any kind of uh, hurdles and all. So thank you so much, Chandan. And guys, I'm sure you must be having so many questions to ask about. So please feel free to mail your questions on our email ID, which is harvardhindualumni@gmail.com. And I would just conclude by saying thank you so much, all of you, for being here for this session, and, you know, just understanding about the concept, which was very new for me as well. So Subhashish, we are definitely going to arrange a second session very soon. So thank you so much, guys. Over to you, Chandan.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Subhashish. Thank you, Kanchan. Thanks a lot for attending it. And it was a wonderful session, very informative. And I really enjoyed every bit of it. And we are going to upload the recordings on YouTube channel. So please stay tuned. And now I'm going to stop the recording unless anybody wants to cover anything, because we already crossed the time limit by 15 minutes around. Subhashish?
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can have a second session for sure. But I want to thank everybody. This wisdom is infinite, but the next session we should have is to take all these information and then finally code this, preserve it, and create different applications. So that is exactly where we want to take this, information and wisdom towards. But thank you, everybody, and thanks for listening to 1.5 hours of this presentation. It actually tires everybody, including me. We'll definitely have a second one going forward. So over to you, Chandan and Kanchan.
Chandan, if we can ask a few questions now, would that be okay?
Actually, we are running short of time, so it will be great if you can send your question on harvardhindualumni@gmail.com. We are going to put that on in the chat, and maybe next time we will cover those answer to those questions, because
What I'm
we are
saying is
already.
maybe like stop the recording. I mean, is the recording that's the length is the issue, or?
No, recording is unlimited.
Yeah,
But
so I mean, if we already
yeah,
can, I mean, if it's okay with Subhashish.
Yeah, Shomitra, go ahead. I mean, I think we need to close because it's like overtime. But yeah, we can take a question. You and I can always chat anyway. But go ahead. Yeah.
so do you want me to
Yeah.
stop the recording or continue? Subhash?
Hello.
You can stop
I
the
think
recording. And who wants to drop off can drop off, I guess. Just I had a few questions because this is so complex, I'll forget by the time the next session happens.
Yeah, go ahead.